Can you say hard hats, folks? Hard hats, lunch pail, steel toe boots.
Anything short of a championship this year is a failure. Look at this boomer right here.
You've just got so much talent here.
Somebody said we need to apologize for Jalen.
Can I close it, John? What are we apologizing for? What did we say? What did we do?
What's going on, guys?
Hey.
I'm so happy. Cut it.
No, I like it. I like the bumper going.
I'm
that
so
producer that used to keep it going for a little bit, you know?
happy this portion of the schedule is over.
Yeah, there's always a great game every year.
Not just for the late nights, but my God, what did we do? Who did we piss off to get back-to-back Portland, Utah, West Coast games? But here we are, and here you are. So, you know, if you're here, we're here, right?
Absolutely. Appreciate the viewers, always.
9's not too bad. We'll get through it.
We're fine. 9 is
No,
fine.
you're talking about the game. Yeah,
But the game, what are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to do? What do we talk about?
Well, Cornette's
And I
going to
like
keep
the whole-
forcing you to do a segment on him every night.
Yeah.
90 seconds, John. Took 90 seconds for that to come up.
Yeah, I don't know.
This is the best one yet, right? After the two other best ones.
I thought he was present. No, I mean, look, there was, Luke was fine. I mean, it was the
12,
Jazz.
9, 6 and a block.
At that streak
It was fine. It was fine. Again, what's interesting is that Luke lob threat, especially against teams that don't really have an interior presence there.
Luke lobs. I like it.
The Luke lob threat opens some things up, so it's interesting because it is a nice little weapon that they're using. Most interesting development of the night: the Bucks are down 19 points to the Kings in Sacramento, which could move this to a 9.5 game lead in the East and 10 in the loss column, which again is almost unthinkable. But Celtics get back in the win. Celtics get back in the win column. Jason Tatum gets out of his little mini funk in a game that none of us wanted to see him play, but he played. He played nonetheless.
We thought he was out certainly last night.
Yeah,
I guess he's going for that MVP race again. I don't know. Maybe he thinks it's one last bottom of the ninth here. I don't know.
He doesn't like sitting. Joe said it last year too. Doesn't like
but you
sitting.
have the Suns coming up. That's going to be a great test, a great matchup. Why not just sit? And you think the Celtics really needed him to beat the Jazz tonight? I don't know.
Not only did he not sit tonight, he came back and played like the last 5 minutes when they were up 20 and took 6 shots down the stretch.
He had to finish with 30 plus, Bobby. The campaign still alive, I guess.
There never was. Look, there was never a legitimate Jason Tatum MVP campaign.
He started it though, John.
I know.
The face of the NBA,
I think Stephen A started it.
And then state-run Celtic social media, propagated it, and it made its way into the broadcast and whatever. And we were forced to have these conversations, and then it forces us to say no, he's not, and then it forces us to come off as haters. But he's never really in the MVP race because, again, the best player on the planet is leading the best team in the NBA or one of them in Jokic, and you're just never going to come near that. And then there's other guys with just otherworldly stats that are just going to be really hard. So he was never truly in it. But I did think he could have snuck his way into a top 3 finish. I just don't ever think it was a realistic thing.
I just think people were having fun with it. I just think it was a conversation that was thrown out there essentially after Joel Embiid went down. Everyone knew he wasn't going to be able to finish the season. Everyone knew that knocked him out of contention for MVP because of the new rules. So I think that's kind of when it started. And then it was just like, well, wait a minute. How long have the Celtics had the best record? Who's the guy that's leading it? And then it just carried on from there. And then, he went on a tear. But those 2 games against the Cavs and the Nuggets on the national stage, I think hurt him, for sure. Or at least hurt him entering that top 4 or top 3 candidates at least. Yeah.
So again, Tatum was fine. You did get you got another, it's good to see the things that we've seen in these last couple of games where people thrust into action with Hauser ably knocking down open looks. and it's nice to see when he does that. Ended up 4 of 11, but he had a really good game the other night. 4 of 11 for 3. The other night, Derek White raining down every potential 3 opportunity. Peyton Pritchard had a poor shooting game tonight, but I thought was fine off the bench. We're going to sit here and talk about Kornet. We're going to talk about Xavier Tillman, who was a plus 14 in 27 minutes with 8 rebounds and looked damn good in his spot duty. So I don't know if this is the day to be trumpeting to blowing the cornet horn, because the guy behind him also looked like he had a really good game.
They played together in that stretch that boosted
but
him up to that.
It's not a competition. It's not a competition. It's not a competition. They're both here to help the team win. And Tillman was awesome tonight. Awesome. So good things off of tonight. What stood out for you guys?
Well, yeah, you said it a little bit with Derek White just going off the way he did, keeping teams, on defense on their heels at least. I just think they just gave him that bit of space that he needed to just catch fire, and it happened. Drew Holiday was solid. I think, obviously Tatum was incredible. That quick first quarter start, you love to see that, sort of reminiscent of, Jalen, what he's been doing the past, 6-7 games. But with Jalen out, I mean, Tatum obviously did what he had to do, and he got going early, and I just think it was one of those games again. I don't think the Celtics needed him in order to beat the Jazz, but he went off what he did, and it's good to see him kind of get back into his offensive rhythm a bit, especially with this game against the Suns. And it looks like Devin Booker's going to be in it. It looks like he's back for those guys, so they're going to be all in, going up against the Celtics in Boston. And it's great to have Jalen take that rest as well. But I do think it's time to rest Tatum at some point, or at least it's around the corner. But with all that being said, look, the game itself, yeah, it was solid. Look, Kornet did his thing. I know we had to spend some time talking about him because the streak continues of solid performances, and this is right there, up there. That Kornet lob, the Luke lob, I was calling it on Twitter. The Luke lob is real. It's a real threat. I love to see how Pritchard was going back to it. He did it in Portland last night, did it again tonight. Drew Holiday, was successful a couple of times. Derek White as well. That constant threat as a second unit with Luke, with Hauser shooting the way he's been shooting. That's a legit 1-2 punch there coming off the bench. And with whatever version of Pritchard shows up, it's always a plus, on top of course, Al Horford. But yeah, look, I want to see more of that from the second unit for sure. I want to see them more comfortable out there, because I do think some combination of those guys is going to be important in the postseason.
Well, and I'm throw up this comment here, and it's worth addressing because, at this point in the night, you're going to be looking at, this point in the season, you're going to be looking at those things. Who's playing those?
I think that's what they're trying to figure out tonight.
Who's playing those bench minutes? What combinations?
Yeah.
Who can you trust? And who's there? Again, my fear is that after the first round, they're going to have a short leash with everybody, and that includes Pritchard, Hauser, Kornet, Tillman. Yeah. I don't think you see Brissett ever outside of a blowout, and I understand it goes tight, but
why do you think that you keep saying this, John? They keep playing well.
Because this is nothing. This means nothing. In the playoffs,
but this is an entire season.
In the playoffs, when it ratchets up and you have people and you have weak spots and teams start to target those weak spots, and they go at Kornet in the post, or they isolate Pritchard, and they're not pulling their own weight, it's going to be a quick hook. We've seen it time and again. And I think that those guys, that's where you're going to really see what it's about. These games, who gives a crap? Like, it's this game was somewhere in between, playing the Denver Nuggets and Pritchard's AAU game where he scored 90 points. Like, it's somewhere in the middle. Like, it's not even close to representative of what you're going to get, especially by the second round in the conference finals of the playoffs. So that's what I'm worried about. It's a potentially quick hook with some guys who you don't fully, you'll trust them in the regular season. I think that trust is going to be tested in the playoffs.
I could see it for sure. It's just, I have a lot of evidence in front of me from this season that all of those guys are capable of playing well within their roles, and they aren't asked to do a lot. They might get isolated. They might get put into actions. So that's certainly something that could hurt them if that happens. But O'Shea's out there just grabbing offensive rebounds. Luke's out there setting screens, doing handoffs, and defending the post. Pritchard's out there knocking down shots and grabbing offensive rebounds. These guys all have very narrow roles, and you really only need one of them to step into the game and give you small minutes in the playoffs. So I think all of these guys, depending on the matchup, are capable of filling their roles. They've shown it all year. There's very few games where I've looked at any of these guys and said, man, they're really struggling. You can't play these guys. I think
they're
on
not
the whole,
now.
they've been...
It's just a different animal in the playoffs, and that's my fear.
I know, but it's going to be a much smaller role that they play when they get there. And we've had that debate all year of, maybe a guy goes down, one of those guys have to step into a major role, or at least a bigger role than they're projected to be in right now. So that's where I think you have a concern with that group, and why you went and got a guy like Tillman for something like that. But if your top six are healthy, John, what do you need? 10 minutes from a seventh guy, 15 minutes? You don't think any one of these guys are capable of that?
I don't know. I'm curious to see how it goes. I don't know that you're going to trust. I think you're going to get a lot of second quarter subs, regular rotations, and then an extremely tight hook in that second half. If you see any signs of things not necessarily working out the way you want them to. So how much are you going to trust these guys and the type of contributions you're going to get from your bench in the playoffs? I'm still dubious. I'm not saying definitively, yeah, these guys are cooked. It's just, I still don't think we know. And so every time we ask that question, I actually don't know the answer. I'd like to think that they can do it, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't blame you, John. I mean, there's been games, throughout the regular season where you got close to nothing from the second unit, and
Right.
I think that's something
I don't think that's true.
That worked. What do you mean, Bobby? I mean, you look at
it's scoring, yeah, but they're not doing the scoring, Josue.
Right, but I just think that there's times where you look at the box.
That's kind of the point, Bobby. You're riding the bench numbers are good on a plus minus thing because you've been riding coattails of starters. Every once in a while, when someone pops off, you have a good Hauser shooting game, a good Pritchard shooting game, or Cornette catches a couple of lobs and he's active. Everyone's like, look, see? But again, the numbers, the scoring is still obviously way down. And outside of Hauser, none of them are specialists in any particular way. That's kind of the thing, is none of them brings you anything other than rest for your starters. Outside of Hauser, who gives you elite shooting, they're just filling time. And so that's always the fear, is can you survive those minutes in an intense playoff atmosphere without them bringing you something that is of great value? Because they don't. Pritchard is on and off.
But you have six guys who bring you something of great value. So
they do, and that's why the bench is always fine. Because in the regular season, when you run regular rotations, there's three starters on the floor at all times. But are you going to run Tatum and three bench guys as you do a ton of times in the regular season? No. Of course not. So it's going to get tighter. Right now they've proven to not be liabilities. That was a worry. Can they be assets? Can they be used? Can they be trusted in the playoffs? I don't know. I think people have a right to question it for sure.
As a collective unit, I just think you see maybe one or two, maybe that second guy was like, okay, those are two solid performances off the bench, but that's not on a nightly basis. I mean, you had those games, but then sometimes you're wondering, I mean, those names change. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, right? Those names change. And sometimes it's Hauser, like it was last night with 20 plus, sometimes it's Pritchard. Other times Pritchard doesn't have it that night, and he's been consistent of late, but that happy medium sometimes I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. You know what I mean? I'm thinking there might be a string of games where he doesn't show up at all, and then all of a sudden he's back. So I just think that's why you're not quite sure who those guys are going to be. I mean, it could be Hauser. I had to guess. I mean, after Horford, he could have one of those games that I think you look back on during the postseason. You say, man, Celtics, if they didn't have that off the bench, they would have really been in trouble. I think we'll have one of those games in the postseason. Al Horford, I think, will be solid as well. But to answer this guy's question, that name can change. It can be Hauser one night, it can be Pritchard another.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Again, the starters are so good, and when you have three of them on the court at all time, it's not as daunting as it was in the past. Before, you had to survive lineups that had only one It's totally different than before. So you can survive these guys. They're the same guys. They're just playing with better players. Before, Bobby, you had lineups that had only one scoring option for the most part, Tatum or Brown, and then a bunch of guys. And you're like, how in the world? What happened every time? Like, how in the world are you going to survive here when you had Jaylen Brown and a non-Tatum lineup against Miami last year, and they're like, okay, we'll just go zone and they won't score for 6 minutes, and then we'll pick on this guy and get a bunch of easy buckets. Everybody'd be like, oh my God, get Tatum back in the game. And that was with some of the same bodies that we're talking about now. They benefit from playing around great players all the time. So again, you can hide them a little bit. I just don't know, in the playoffs, how that's going to play. That's always been my concern. Always been my concern with this team. I think we're fooling ourselves if you just look at the regular season and be like, they were fine here, they'll be fine there.
Yeah, but it hasn't been a regular season where they've gone up and down and there's been these crazy, great games from the bench, or man, the bench killed you this night, and it's back and forth. I think they've been pretty steady and consistent throughout the year. And like you said, because of the fact that you have players who are doing so much among the top six, you're asking Hauser to hit threes. You're asking Kornet to guard the post. You're asking, just guys to do what they're good at. Even Brissett, like, he just comes in and grabs 3-4 offensive rebounds every time he comes in, like it's nothing. So these guys have been consistent. They all focus really on one thing each. I think they've all gotten better at those individual things as the time has gone on here for the guys who have been here for a little bit. And sure, you have concerns about Kornet against certain types of offenses that are able to spread guys out in space. You have concerns about Pritchard, who sometimes just doesn't have a shot in these games, and it's similar for Hauser. But if you're just talking about, like you said, going out there and holding the line, I think they're all capable of doing that. And more often than not, I think you've at least gotten one good contribution off that bench in every single game this year, which is all you really need come playoff time from this group. So
when they get exposed, it looks really bad, and that's why people have a freak out. Because sometimes,
how many times does that happen?
I know, but when it happens, it's happening against a good team that you're going to face in the playoffs. And when it does happen, you're like, oh my God, these guys aren't playable. So when it happens, it's more of a indicator of what potentially could happen later on versus getting away with it against bottom feeding Eastern Conference teams, or games where there are starters injured or other people have thin benches too, and you're playing with 3 starters. Again, it's Boston's second unit. If you're playing a team that doesn't have Boston's juice in the starting lineup and they're down a player and you get into their second units, you're talking about the Celtics have 3 starters in Kornet, and those guys have 1 playable player and a couple. It's always going to be a mismatch there. Again,
that's why I think they have a good dynamic here. People want to see them go out and get Alani Walker. People want to see them go out and get all these different scorers off the bench. You have enough scoring. You have enough playmakers, shooters, all the rest. You need guys who do little things, and that's what all the guys off their bench do. So maybe you're going to end up being right, John. And, in May,
I'm not saying I'm right. I'm saying nobody knows. And people in the comments being like, oh, it's so negative. It's not. I'm
just going off what we've watched so far.
I'm going off what we don't know. And so I'm just saying I'm not convinced of what we've watched translates directly in the playoffs. I am a little bit concerned. That's it. I'm a little bit concerned with these guys because they're not new. You've had Kornet, Pritchard, and Hauser on this team and been afraid to play them in the playoffs.
Yeah, we criticized them last year for not playing Hauser.
And so the same guys did not get leaps and bounds better. Everyone around them got better. So the same guys you were scared of playing last year, you're all of a sudden confident this year. I don't know. They're the same guys. They look good because they've got people around them. Nobody could throw a lob last year. So half of Kornet's offense was neutralized. It's they haven't been able to throw a lob for 4 years.
Well, I love the fourth quarter tonight.
Has great hands too.
Yeah.
The fourth quarter tonight's great to me because you got to experiment with things you might do in a playoff setting if you really need to. Down a guy, you're throwing Tillman and Kornet out there together. I think Holiday and White were leading that lineup, and then you had Hauser out there with them, Pritchard at a certain point, and you went on a 20-0 run. I know it's the Jazz. I know it's a shorthanded Jazz team without Markkanen, but to be able to, leaning on those guys, go on a 20-0 run, it just speaks a lot to the way those guys are fitting their roles.
Isn't this crazy? Cornette's probably had more lobs than Rob had last year. That's how bad. That's how bad the people handling the ball, Point, Tatum, and Marcus were at getting. It's insane.
White's so
It really
good,
is
and that's what
crazy.
really keyed that little run. Like, you had Tillman and Cornette doing some screening separately. Both of them were rolling in different directions. I thought they did some really cool stuff on that stretch. And like we talked about yesterday, John, when White has the ball in his hands, even without Tatum out there in that situation, amazing things happen. I mean, they were +8 without Tatum tonight. So it's a real strength having him out there and other guys, like you said, being able to command those second unit lineups, because I think all of those guys bring really good things to the table. You just need, like you said, the initiators, the scorers, the guys to drive those lineups. A lot of times it's been Brown this year too. The second unit numbers with Brown actually look pretty good this year, because
This year, totally different. The Tatum
Yeah.
last year, it was that massive disparity with Tatum off the court, and it was ridiculous. So those Brown-led lineups were brutal. This year, it's not flipped, but they're the Brown the non-Tatum minutes, they're winning them by convincing fashion. So it's totally different this year. But again, I think it's because you've got able-bodied, your point guards and guys who you can run the offense through that are managing things, versus those stretches when you would play either Tatum and subs and Brown and subs, was just give those guys the ball and just let them see what they could get on their own, because they're the only ones who could, or occasionally Brogdon, who could create his own offense there, I think, in some of those units as well. And he was actually a godsend, because he was, for the first time in a couple of years, the only guy outside of those two that could get their own shot off. Now they've got a lot of those guys, between
But you also had
Porzingis
that
and Holiday.
dilemma. You had that dilemma at the end of games of, are we playing Brogdon
Yeah, that
and
killed them.
Smart,
That's why they had to
White
get
and-
rid of Smart.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But then now you have guys that just, between White and Drew Holiday, they just make things so seamless. Like, in terms of the offense, like when guys like Tatum or Brown, like either one's taking a break, they can just, take matters to their own hands without having to be
They're kind of the same guy, right? It's amazing.
Yeah.
They really are. Like, I mean, White gets more headlines, and he's
very
probably
similar vibes,
more over effective, but they are in the sense that they're just pros. They almost they're prone to turnovers from time to time too. You can't be perfect, but it feels like they make the right decision 99 times out of 100 when they have the ball. And the way that they play defensively, both on the ball, on their own, everyone will look at like a time or two where one of them might get beaten straight up one-on-one, but their team defense and their instincts and the way that they move things around, they're like two of the same guy. It's incredible to have two of these guys. It really is.
Yeah.
And the way White's played this year.
I think that's why when they approached Portland with that deal for Drew, it was just like, listen, let's just make it happen. Whatever. Oh, they want more than one first round pick. Let's do it, because it's just that security, of having two of those guys.
It's amazing.
Marcus in the rearview mirror. You're moving ahead with Kristaps, but then now you have these two like pillars in your backcourt that is no other team can compare themselves to. Like, it's not even close. So
no, I mean, you talk just the two-way ability of those guys, and the shooting is just insane. Right. Just watching White tonight knock down all of those shots, it's so friggin' good. So I mean, White was incredible tonight. He deserves a little bit. He deserves a little bit of time too. Louise, I can see, is not in the chat. She sat this one out, obviously, because there was no Jaylen Brown, and that's okay. You don't have to make every game. But
what's that Brown injury? Scalia?
It's basically ass. Okay, it's basically his ass. I
loved Eddie tonight. That was my favorite line of the broadcast tonight. Was that that word was in the message or something by Grandmaster Flash?
Yeah. Oh yeah. The way Drew played that off, did he really know that song, or was he?
That was a crazy reference.
Wait, what was the reference?
The injury Brown has, Scalia or whatever.
I guess that's a line that's dropped in the message by Grandmaster Flash, and then like Drew almost said it too fast. He was like, "Oh, did he say that in that song?" And then I was thinking to myself, "Drew, you know that song?"
That's all right.
But I could be wrong. He could have known exactly what he's talking about.
That's such a crazy word.
But the pace in his response, I was like, he said a little too fast. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's true. So we'll get into that a little bit.
Eddie knows his classic rap, man. To pull that one phrase or line. Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah. More to come as we kind of roll through the final game of this 5-game road trip, and heading for the home stretch here. Celtics about to expand their lead to friggin' 9.5 games in the East if this Buck score holds, which is just insane. We'll keep it rolling here, and we'll take in some of your comments and whatnot. We want to quickly tell you about our sponsor, our wonderful sponsor, PrizePicks, the largest fantasy sports platform in all of North America. Easiest, most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. That's it. Pick more or less on 2 to 6 players, stat projections, and watch the winnings roll in. No football right now to mess around with, but you got a lot of basketball action. March Madness is starting, so it's a good opportunity to get involved here. Conference tournaments, NBA playoffs around the corner. So why not jump in on the action? Download the app. It's super fun, easy to use. It's got pictures. I like pictures. Makes it really easy to kind of navigate. The interface is awesome. So download the app. Use code CLNS. First deposit match up to 100. No questions asked. Deposit 100, get 100, use it for whatever you want. Once again, download that app, use the code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Back to the Jazz game here. It really is amazing. And I know, of course, the Jazz are without Markkanen, and I don't know who else. Who else did they miss tonight? Anyone?
I think that was it. They were pretty healthy otherwise.
Pretty healthy. Second night of a back-to-back, 5th game of a road trip before heading home, playing in elevation, playing shorthanded. It still is amazing that it's like this is such a classic
16
game.
16-3 now without Porzingis.
It's a classic game that teams lose. This type of game, teams lose all the time. And I'd never felt like they threatened that losing was an option. I guess when you're talking about the bench, it's nice to see bench players play along with starters, be effective, not look completely out of place, and be able to be as effective as some other team's starters, even though it's a inferior team like Utah. It's still an NBA team, and they're not getting blown off the floor there. They're totally holding their own. That counts for Cornette. That counts for Hauser, Pritchard the other night as well in Portland. So I'll give them that. It's a different animal when you get thrown in with the starters. How many times do we see Pritchard even a couple of years ago get a spot start and look like he just didn't belong at all? Even Grant, when that would happen sometimes, he just wasn't playing well with the starters. You just look out of place. You're better off playing. Some people really can only play against second unit players. It is good to see the bench guys, getting starter reps and being able to hold their own.
Yeah, they play those defined roles, which I think is important. And last year you had a good scoring bench between Grant and Brogdon and everything, but those guys that sometimes throw your rhythm off. I thought Grant's shot selection was questionable last year at times. Brogdon, I know, got a lot of criticism for the lack of passing, the lack of lob ability in his sense. He would basically just catch the ball and shoot in his role, and that was his role.
Bobby,
so you can't knock him for it,
man. Yeah, he had a big sacrifice.
So it's just a group that, and we said this at the deadline, John, we were debating whether you upgrade or not. There's something to having a group that understands their roles, and everybody on this team does. That's been a key to the starters figuring it out. Holiday, you mentioned earlier, is that 5th option there. Sometimes just looks invisible out there because he's so uninvolved directly in the offense, but he has that subtle impact on both ends in terms of things he's doing out there, even if it's just spacing and calling things out defensively. So you have guys up and down this lineup that are interchangeable, which surprises me, John, because I'm as big of a fan of the bench as I've been this year. I came into the year looking at the dynamic of this team and saying, if you have one guy out, you're probably in trouble. If you have 2 guys out, you probably can't even win. And they've basically won every single one of those games this year when they've had multiple guys resting, multiple bench guys stepping into the starting lineup. It's crazy how seamless it's been. And, Joe deserves some credit for that. I think everybody who's been around with this team for the last couple of years, developing some of those guys from the ground up, deserve a lot of credit. I mean, this is a debate we had a while ago, John, like the development in this team, bringing guys up. They haven't done it in a typical way in terms of drafting guys in the first round and integrating them, but they've been able to pull some undrafted guys in, get them in the system, figure out how they want to play, and those guys end up being really good fits. And I think you're starting to see some other guys lower in the organization now start being on a path to doing that now. So it's impressive what they're doing in that sense this year, and it's a big reason that they're going to rocket towards 60 wins here. Is they've been able to rest guys consistently all year. I mean, what was it 16-3 without Porzingis? If you said Porzingis was going to miss 20 plus games this year, you probably would have thought that would have had a big impact on this team.
I don't know. I think 65 games was the dream.
That was my prediction, I think, honestly. But yeah.
But he's done it in a way where it's just been resting, and they've gotten.
Yeah, I mean, with two.
Well, they've done it in a way
extremely minor. An ankle and was it a hamstring or a thigh or something? A calf.
Yeah.
That was it. But each one was like, oh God, I hope this isn't a lingering, recurring thing, and it ended up not being. So it's been pretty. Like I think he's only lost like 5 or 6 games to injury, and the rest has just been straight up maintenance.
Yeah, exactly. And you look at that record, and that's a part of it that I was worried about was. Is that going to be closer to a 500 record? I called it life without Porzingis. I thought it would happen more often when we got that. What was it, about a week and a half or 10 days? I think it was. That was the longest stretch that I can think of where he missed consecutive games. But outside of that, it's just been really precautionary stuff, which I think is obviously very important for the Celtics team going into the playoffs and making sure that he's okay for the long haul for a team that's supposed to be playing in June. But look, I just think when guys like Cornet and Hauser jump into the lineup and everything looks just so comfortable and natural, I think it's a testament to what they're doing on the defensive side. I just think they look so comfortable there, whereas before the switching and sometimes those guys couldn't even hold down a particular stint because they were getting beat by their man, whether it was off the ball, whether it was miscommunication on the switches. Now completely different, and against a team like this, the Utah Jazz, without their best player or even with them, you're not going into it wondering, I hope these guys get off to a good start. Yeah, Jason Tatum went off for 15 in that first quarter. That helps. But even before that, you saw a lot of that structured approach on defense that I feel like made things harder for Utah, even out of the gates, which obviously didn't help when Tatum went off. And, the Celtics, what was it? They tied for the second time this year, 44 points in the first quarter. That's the most they've scored in the first quarter of this season.
Do you think Tatum got right tonight, John?
I mean, again, I think it was good to get him started early. I liked one of the things he did out of the gate, that when he, drove, down the right side, contact on the way to the hoop, and then went up and slammed it through contact again. I like that because we were talking about his problems finishing. He was really poor around the rim last game, and kind of that cutesy foul hunting thing that he does sometimes, as opposed to just go up and go strong and live with the result and play through the contact. So I like that. I don't know if that kind of set him, put him in a good place. And then the shot fell early when he knocks down a couple of those threes. I think that's good. He's very much a rhythm scorer, so I think it is important there. I think the only time he gets himself out of it is when those shots start falling early, and then then the shot selection suffers later in the game. There's periods of that, but again, you're the number one offensive guy out there. You're going to have to look for your shot, and he definitely had a better game offensively there. And I think getting started early helped. And it's not a Jalen wasn't in, so he did good. But yeah, it makes a difference when you don't have Porzingis and Brown, who oftentimes are your kind of hot first quarter guys. Somebody's got to carry it, right? And he did it. So I thought that was good.
Yeah, I think that's why it stood out, because those guys weren't there either. So it's kind of like not like, oh, you have to do this now, but he just happened, and he just looked comfortable out there. It wasn't like he was fighting for those points. What was it, 5 for 8? He started off. So
yeah,
some good pace from him too. I think he's, compared to before in points at other years in his career, when they have to go, he'll go. And I thought they played with a great pace in that first quarter. Jazz kind of pulled him into it, but for him to be able to thrive and succeed in that spot, I think is important, because even Joe, as many gripes as we have with him and the way he sort of manages Tatum sometimes, wants him to go. Like, there's no debate there. He wants this team playing fast, getting into sets quickly. And, I love the stuff he was saying on the radio before the game too. And he talked a little bit about it, after last game, is all of a sudden, I guess it's just the way Portland guard them and the Jazz guard them. So I'm not sure if this is something that's going to last, and maybe it's a little bit Porzingis being out too. They got into some of those, 2, 3, 4 pass possessions that I think they look at their best in, and he can be a part of that. He can initiate that. I wish they leaned on that more often. And it's interesting Joe's saying this now, because in the past, John, he would say, we got to take the first open shot. Like, if we pass that up, who knows if there's going to be another good one. And now it's like, oh, we want 3, 4.
Now we want to work through it. It was a strange departure for Joe to say something like that, which is, exactly that. It
3, 4 actions in a set. Yeah.
That's what the Nuggets do, like that's really not what the Celtics do. They whip it around until they find their first open look and they take it. I left this comment up here because it is interesting. I've never loved the Tatum subbing out at the 6-minute mark, especially if he doesn't get a shot off because he's playing it slow, waiting for the game to come to him. The rationale behind it always is that he's going to carry that second unit by himself, oftentimes late in the first into that second quarter when you go through your major rotations. And that was essential because that unit couldn't survive without him on the floor. This year, that with the Celtics having been better with Tatum off the floor and with other people running with the bench, is it as essential that Joe sticks with this rotation? Because it's what was necessary in the past, and it's almost a carryover from regime to regime where Tatum's that first sub at the 6-minute mark. But how the hell are you taking your best player off the floor in the playoffs at the 6-minute mark? It's a very strange thing to do. And they're going to keep doing it because they're not going to change all their rotations at this point in the year. But I understood the rationale behind it before. I don't fully now. So I don't know that it's – I wonder if that changes a little bit in the playoffs because it is a little odd to pull him out that quickly before he has a chance to make any impact on the game.
Yeah, I wonder if they will let him cook a little longer in the playoffs. Yeah, I just feel like it's just the way they're structured. It's just their sub pattern that they typically stick with. But I don't know. I mean, after seeing the Eastern Conference Finals, I mean, last year, obviously, maybe it took them to go down 3-0, but you started seeing Joe start doing, things on the fly off the cuffs. I would assume if he feels compelled to, he would probably do the same thing, especially if Tatum's going off. If something similar to what we saw tonight, that's happening in the playoffs. You can't take him out. By the 6-minute mark, he was the double digits, so I in scoring. So I don't think. But
again, no Porzingis, no Brown. So, I mean, I get it.
The chance of that happening,
They flipped that the last homestand a couple of times. I think you pointed that out, John. They took Brown out early.
They did
in a couple of those games. And
Tatum's played the entire first quarter a couple of times. And again, that feels like they're messing around. They did entirely flip them one game.
I asked Joe about that, and he said it was more about keeping a guy who was rolling early in the flow in Tatum's case. So he does have some flexibility there. He'll see things like that, and I think he will adjust when he thinks it's needed. So I get that point. You probably want to kick that rest back anyway if he's going to be playing like 40, 43 minutes and only have like 1, 2, maybe stints on the bench. So you don't want to just come in 6 minutes into the game. It'd be interesting to look back at how they handled that in the past there, because they have done that for a while. And like you said, John, it was out of necessity. So that's something you can tweak with fairly easily, I think. But there's a dynamic on this team that Brown's going to be starting these games hot. So he's going to be the one who stays in more often than not. And Tatum will be stepping out a lot of the time, like you said, without major scoring contributions in the first quarter. And I do think that impacted them last postseason at times, how uninvolved he'd be early. And if that extended beyond that first stint, you see him not as involved in the other.
That's why in the playoffs, I'm nervous about that. Yeah, I don't love it.
I mean, tonight you saw him blocking shots and stuff off that hot start.
I'll say this also. He defensively, he can flip a series with his defense right now.
He did that Brooklyn one, remember?
He is so hard to get around right now. How his lateral movement and his length make it so he's almost impossible to drive by. I don't care who it is, smaller, quicker guys, no one gets around him. You see other guys get beaten off the dribble a bit. Even the great Derek White's going to be first team all defensive. He gets taken off the dribble. Tatum cannot be taken off the dribble when he's locked in on defense. Sometimes maybe he might fall asleep or be late on something, but when he's locked in, he's a legit weapon, and we've seen it a couple of times this year. I did just want to point that out. I had something here, and it disappeared, and I was going to put it up. Joe talking about stuff. We'll get it back, and we'll throw it in there. Where is it? I really wanted to go to it.
It's gone.
Yeah, it sounds important.
It's gone. It's gone. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see if there's any more tweaking there. When you're talking about rest, I was looking at the schedule. You definitely want to roll everybody against Phoenix. I think you do want to get those good tests done. I know it doesn't mean anything in the standings, but if you look at it, you've got Phoenix and then a back-to-back Washington, Detroit. I could easily see Tatum missing that Washington game. That would give them from Thursday. That would give him from Thursday to Monday off if he stays and plays, versus Detroit. Then you've got that Wednesday game against Milwaukee. Then it's Detroit, Chicago, Atlanta. And then a couple more worth playing. New Orleans, Oklahoma City. That's fine. But then the rest, Sacramento, Portland, Milwaukee, they'll have clinched so long before that. It's insane how early they're going to clinch. This thing's going to be, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This thing, by the time you get back from Atlanta, Bobby, they'll have wrapped this up before April, which is nuts.
Yeah,
possibly in Atlanta, which is nuts.
You're already starting to think about potential first-round opponents too and stuff like that. So I like doing something like that Kornet-Tillman combination tonight because it's time to experiment. It's time to rest. And I think part of Joe, he said he's gotten better at this year, but there's still a part of Joe I feel like that's like, let's go. We're winning this game. We're winning the next game. Then we're winning the game after that. And it's great. But there does have to be some foresight too of what the end of the season's about here, which is seeing what you have in some other guys, sitting some guys. I can't believe Tatum played in this game after how he looked last night. It's great. He played the way he did, and he got that stretch late in the game, I guess, to get some shots up. But, man.
I was going to say, I can't believe
how many times has he rested this year?
I can't believe he checked back in with the game.
I can't believe it either. We were talking about it earlier, and I think it's going to be a continued theme, regardless of how much people wish it to not be. But I do think that the bench is going to be, wait till you see it in the playoffs and how it works. But there's no denying they have been good throughout the year. Not just the guys who have been consistently part of that 8-man rotation that Joe likes to employ, but the stay ready crew as well. And here's Joe, giving props to those guys for being able to step in.
Couple games, everybody's stepping up. Like, it's just kind of what we're trying to build, where we have an environment or locker room, a culture of, like, it doesn't matter who's in, guys are ready to play at all times. And the work that the player development team does, getting guys ready, the professionalism that those guys have, they're just constantly ready. And I have no hesitancy putting any one of those guys in because of the work they do, and it reflected over these 2 games, and that's kind of what we're trying to fight for, is that depth. And it's been fun to watch.
And every single Celtics writer will rush to their keyboard, and that will be their story tomorrow.
It has been fun to watch.
Joe Mazzulla and the bench being, the stay ready crew. Because what else are you going to talk about in a game like this? Joe, by the way, excellent at setting narratives these days. He speaks it into existence, and then that becomes the public record. Many times his clarification of what's going on or the thing that he decides to emphasize in that post game has driven the narrative of a lot of what's being said right now. So for Joe, who we like to kind of beat up on a little bit for being inelegant at times with his press conferences, he's actually done a pretty damn good job setting the narrative this year.
Yeah, and that stuff's calculated, And
he knows what he's doing. He's good at it. He's gotten really good at it, because that's going to be the story.
Remember against Denver, they missed 2 threes late. That's why they lost. Yeah.
They're all getting good at it. Jalen in the 50 wins yesterday, that became the story. So they're getting good at setting those narratives for what's going on. But so a little bit more on the bench there, but I think it's a reasonable thing to talk about, certainly on a night where you're down a couple of starters and you're thrusting 2 guys into the starting rotation.
It is fun to watch, especially when do you come into this game with any doubt that those guys are going to perform, that they're going to win this game? It's It's obvious at this point. They could have sat everybody.
If it was a
John.
Tatum checked out night, you know what I mean? Like you have those nights where everybody's like you have those like, let's see if the threes fall, and if they don't, I'm done.
They've had those games though, but they've won them. You know,
and they've won
dug
some of
themselves
them,
out
yeah.
of some holes in those games. And
Yeah, but by the second half, though, it's just like you can just see, like, yeah, those are the games where. But yeah, I mean, when Tatum went off, you never got the sense that even if even when they pulled it to within 8, that they were going to go on that run.
I feel like even yesterday, when all 5 starters were on the injury report, you know, they could have started Pritchard, Hauser, Brissett, and Cornette and Tillman and won that game. Like, I think that's just how interchangeable it's been, especially in matchups like that. You know, I think they could have gotten by with none of their starters in that game. So it's a real thing. I love what that group's done this year. I'm gaining confidence in them. I get why you have some skepticism, John. But even in a year like this, to have a guy like Keita come in and give you some real minutes when you were down big early in the year. And we've been saying forever, like, man, where the Heat find those two-way guys that come in and just start playing well? Well, you did it this year with a guy like Keita, who played his or was active for his 42nd game tonight at the NBA level. So, like, given that they have these 5 expensive and just, you know, this top 6 with such a big cachet, for them to have the depth they do this year is really impressive. And it, you know, goes back to that 2021 year when we had those conversations, John, about how they couldn't figure it out, couldn't draft, couldn't develop, couldn't find any diamonds in the rough. And listen, these guys aren't amazing. These aren't guys who are going to go on to make $20 million, but that's great too, because maybe you can keep a Cornette after this year. Maybe you can keep a Hauser after his next contract. Probably not, because there's that cash strapped now. But if you keep cycling them through, as they're trying to do now, it's going to make a difference.
Yep, no doubt. Bucks are flying. Bucks are, you know, going down hard right now. So this is going to be a 9.5 game lead. Playoffs.
Yeah,
if the playoffs started today and the 7 and 8 seeds hold, the 8 seed is Miami right now. It is interesting. I know.
Who do you want to see round 1, John?
I don't know. I want to see the Sixers without Embiid, first off. You know, I don't think any of them are going to beat the Celtics, but I think Miami's going to freak some people out, some PTSD, but it also could be a Celtics romp because they're considerably better than the Heat. I think the Pacers are going to freak some people out, but I don't think the Pacers can. I think the Pacers can get a game or 2 off you just by going crazy and getting hot, but I don't think they can win a series.
They lost
against
a couple key guys too.
Yeah. So, and the Math are in there going down. I think they're hemorrhaging right now. So they don't seem to be. I'll always say Miami's going to be the one. And again, maybe it's not logical. Maybe it's strictly emotional. But
if we sit here a month from now and it's Miami on the other side, we're all going to be going, it's just natural. How can you not after what we watched the last 3 years?
But it's also one of those teams where if the Celtics beat them, it could be, okay, they could be anyone now because mentally.
Yeah, but they have to do it first. Yeah.
Right. They have to do it first. But, I mean, if they make the NBA Finals, we'll all say it's a disappointment. I mean, it is. It would be. If this team that we're watching that's this good, if they don't make it to the NBA Finals, barring injuries, it's a disappointment. So, yeah, I would love to see it just for the drama of it and just for the just the poetic finish that it would be to
it's a great
happens
story.
after that.
But
Miami Heat's future, and all that. I'd love to see just how that would look after the fact. But and obviously, I wouldn't see how the Celtics would look. I really do think it would change them in that they finally beat the Heat. They finally beat the bully.
Yeah, but and you're right. It could change them and it could set them off into a good direction. It's like just jump into the icy water and, get acclimated right away rather than,
Remember 2022? We had the same debate that year.
Yeah.
Nets or Hawks that year, or whoever it was.
Right. But they got there without facing Miami, so you look at the last 4 years, it's a legit rivalry, between these two teams.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I have no reason to believe they beat Miami if they drew them in the first round last year. So, you could have been talking about Joe Mazzulla being fired and the most catastrophic end of the season,
What podcast was it? Didn't Joe make that joke during the offseason?
With Redick, yeah. He said
it was Redick, right? He was like, what are we facing?
It was funny.
What if he goes?
funny
I'm probably not here if that happened.
Yeah,
I don't have
not.
a job anymore. I'm
and
unemployed.
it was funny too because he mentioned someone, was grilling him about them losing the 1 seed down the stretch of the season. That was me. I was like, you guys don't care about the 1 seed? And then after he was like, if we got the 1 seed, we would have got Miami and I would have got fired.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I don't know. I don't think anything is about the opponent. I think in past years, it very much is matchups. And I honestly believe, and I've always said this, and everyone thinks I'm an asshole for it, that these conference finals appearances that they'd gotten to were just simply luck of the draw and not necessarily massive accomplishments. They got, you get a good draw, you avoid a particular team.
Maybe in 2020. I don't know.
I think a lot of times it ends up that way but that was also that some teams might have given them problems. I more mean that matchups mattered, right? Like who you played could be the difference between surviving and going home. There's no such team in the East that exists this year. Anything that happens to the Celtics is going to be entirely self-inflicted. It's not going to have anything to do with who they play. So you're really more concerned, and have been all year, with whether they can continue kind of this level of play, this professionalism, cutting down on the mistakes, staying with what's worked, not devolving into panicky iso ball, when things get tough, offense stagnating, shot chucking, settling for shots, not working super hard for them. If they get into that, that's what kills them. It's not the other team that's going to do it. It's just whether or not they can kind of maintain discipline and play this way.
Right.
Yeah.
And not get caught up in the moment. We see what happens when teams just hang around, or that's all they really have to do, which hasn't been easy throughout the course of the regular season for many teams. But the tough ones, that they pull through, if they get it to a certain point in that fourth quarter, or they feel like they can make a run, or if it's still a 2-point game, it's anyone's game. I mean, we've talked about it time and time again about Celtics' late game execution. And we'll see what version of the Celtics show up in the postseason. But yeah.
Yeah, it's less about losing those series this time around, John, and more them extending. And that was the story to some degree last year too. In round 1, that series should have been a sweep, maybe 5 games at the most, and almost went 7. And then all of a sudden you're down 3-2 in round 2, which never should have happened either. But you were right on the doorstep of losing that game 6 and going home in round 2. So that's what you can't do this year. And if they do that early on, depending on the match, there's some disaster scenarios, John, just with how weird the East has been this year, where, Knicks just keep sliding, and then all of a sudden they're fully healthy and they're playing you round 1 because of some weird, return schedule late in the year. Embiid's return. Like, is Philly going to slide down to 8 and he's going to come back and look great round 1? Like, that's where you could really get screwed. Forget about the Heat and all the stuff that we're just kind of, irrationally scared of there. There's some real scenarios where you actually play like a second round, maybe even an East Finals team in round 1 because of the way the injuries are stacking up in the East here. I still respect Indy's play style too. Like, they put the Celtics in a real frenetic place, even though they've kind of slid a little bit there. So that's where you worry about going 7 games round 1. And maybe you're going to sneak out of it inevitably playing at home in that kind of game. But it's like, man, you got to play that kind of series round 1. Now you're on to round 2 against a team that maybe played 5 on the other side. That's the only thing I worry about here. I do think they inevitably get by round 1, no matter who it is. But you're the 1 seed by 9 games, John. Can you finally just get Chicago and beat them 4-0? Like, that's what you're supposed to get when you're the 1 seed. And it doesn't happen as much anymore.
No, it doesn't. You're right. I mean, there's not that. There's no cupcake there, right?
Like LeBron playing the Bobcats back in the Heat days.
Hey, you could blame the play-in for that, and
the play-in is messed with it too. Yeah.
In a way, it's good. It gives those teams a legitimate chance. And the Miami Heat, it only took a few years of them doing this thing where like they're the best example. Like they reached all the way to the NBA Finals. So
yeah,
the old format, they wouldn't even have qualified. So
they would not. So yeah, again, I'm not super concerned with anything that happens there in that round. In first round, second round, I guess losses are in play. I'd just be shocked to see it, wouldn't you?
with this team for sure.
Lose
But
the
yeah, I mean,
series
look,
now.
last year this team's shown its vulnerabilities time and time again, and we kind of just like overlooked it, or at least we dissected the hell out of it, but we never really said like, hey, maybe this is why this team may not be quite there. And then the Miami Heat, boom, 1, 2, 3 happened so quickly. All of a sudden they're down 3-0, but they were down. They had their backs against the ropes. Jason Tatum played one of the best games of his career to save that series against the Philadelphia 76ers. I mean, it's easy to forget that. I mean, shit, the organization forgot so quickly that they fired Doc 2 days later, like that could have easily ended their season right there. And then, of course, they could have easily, or the Miami Heat, if one thing goes a different direction, that Derek White thing, or Marcus Smart waits a bit longer and White doesn't get there in time, there is no game 7. And maybe that changes things. Who knows? But I just don't think this team, because of its strengths and its changes in so many different ways, drastic changes, I don't think that version of the Celtics can show up again. But we have to wait and see. Obviously, I think Celtics fans know because of how many times they've been sort of teased with that. Okay, this is it. This is that team. But we'll see.
We will see.
It's a different team.
It's a totally different team. It's a different team. The only fear is if they forget themselves, right? That's it. Like if they forget what they became this year and what got them here. That's the only thing. Because again, you have guys, the good and the bad thing, about, having the core players who've been here is they've kind of done it one way because they had to. When it gets to the playoffs and everything is magnified, again, that residual fear of the type of, slow it down and walk it up and let the other team set their D. That's the only thing that's going to get them.
It was like a pride thing. Remember that? It was like, oh, we're the Celtics. We're going to do our thing. It's going to go our way. And if it doesn't, we'll figure it out anyways. Like that whole thing.
Tristan Thompson. We're playing for something bigger.
Yeah, that was that team. That team was a freaking those were not serious people. That team.
I can't believe that was only 3 years ago.
That was a hell of a chapter, though. Jeez.
We were having like.
Shout out to Jeff Teague. Great debut. Remember that squad?
We were having discussions about the downfall of the franchise that year. I don't know how it ended up where they are now. It is so crazy.
It's pretty amazing what they've done to pull it together. In a couple of different ways.
Brad and Danny, yeah.
Both, but not just that. Between
the Ine situation,
just Kyrie leaving, all the wheels set into motion there, and then having to undo all of that just to get back to like normal, and then blowing it up again to get elite. It's really hard to do what they did to get to this point. So hats off.
This never happens in the NBA. Never. Like there's usually a setback for a few years. And with the Celtics, we never really saw that. They continued to make the Eastern Conference Finals one way or another, or at least give you that deep playoff run with after Kyrie Irving, after that era.
Yeah. Shout out to Isaiah, by the way, playing out in Utah. I know a lot of the writers made it out to his game this afternoon. Danny signed him, gave him the G League deal.
Yeah.
All out.
Hopefully he
Hopefully
he ends up back in the league down the stretch here.
Give that man a contract.
Resilient dude, you've got to. I'd love to see it. I mean, imagine if he came in here and just played a couple of games down the stretch. When
they're so against it for some reason.
No. Oh, I don't know.
Because it's a sideshow. They were more against it before because people would have wanted it to be a thing.
You think it's possible this time?
No, I don't.
I don't think it's possible because there's I don't know if that story has a happy ending, with this organization. I'm not saying him coming back to the NBA as in general, but
Josue, you and me have talked about
the backcourt. We just gushed over how many different guards can thrive at that spot.
It's comments like this. This is why you can't do it.
Yeah, and then it's like here, take this very last spot.
What are I saying? No, you're gonna
years
get
ago,
that. Yeah.
I was for this, man. Like the era we were just talking about, the
they needed
teams, like those guys, like
they needed
guys
to do
like
it, Josue.
What's up?
you and I have talked about this. They needed to do it when they did the Joe Johnson thing, which was so stupid.
Yeah,
And then,
right.
you know,
When
the
everyone was
standing
getting
like,
called up because it was that there was a 6-week off season because of COVID, and then that's a great point. Guys,
why was Joe Johnson here? Like, that was the time to do it. Al-Farouq Aminu was here. You had all these random guys in and out the door that year. You could have given Isaiah at least one game that year. But
they signed him for the 2000s night at TD Garden while making me feel old. But yeah, so here it's Joe Johnson 20 years later. Remember him?
What kills me about the Isaiah is I don't necessarily want to see it, but I know he wants it so badly, and I hate the fact that he can't get like that.
Remember, he said
that,
he called Smart.
You think he wants it badly with the Celtics though?
I think he wanted very badly to come back here at multiple opportunities.
Oh, I think years ago, and now I don't think so, but yeah,
every year for the last 2 and 3 years, and they would never. Hey guys, I'm here, and can you just lose my number? It just really he wasn't getting that kind of
because he did do a lot.
He was quote tweeting people like Celtics fans, being like, "Let him know," and then that was turning into articles and stuff. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Oh my God, Jabari Parker! Holy crap! I forgot he existed.
It's crazy because a lot of those guys,
so many players came through.
Jabari Parker. Oh my God.
All of these guys played for the team that went on to win the finals. Like, that year to me is gonna that year will never go away with me. The fact that they were playing Ennis and Jabari Parker and Hernan Gomez to start the year, and they had all those collapses midway through the year, and we're sitting there saying blow it up, and then they made the finals. Like, that just still blows my mind.
Well, that was
what was happening in November happened.
That was the wildest regular season turnaround we've ever seen.
That was wild.
Right after the gut-wrenching Knicks loss. Remember when the Knicks came back and I think it's when they had the uncomfortable conversation. Damn it, Tatum and Brown. But that was just one part of it. But a lot of it was Ime too, guys. Let's keep it 100, man. Like, keep it 100. It was Ime holding them accountable. That was like the last step of their maturation process. Like, okay, we have to hold each other accountable.
I refuse to speak to anyone who ever referred to Semi Ojeleye as the Giannis stopper. Like, I don't want to know your name. Like, I don't want
leave Shemi alone, man. I like Shemi. What up?
I don't care, but people who bought into that stuff, like, oh my God. Yeah.
Too bad.
He didn't string together stops. He didn't string together the consecutive stops against Giannis.
But it's crazy. It's like what you convinced yourself was real then, and then you see this team and you're like, Garshawn Yabusele, holy crap. Then you see this team and you're like, oh yeah, those guys sucked. Like,
you have a roster up right now. Yabusele, you got a roster up right now.
Oh, the French Draymond Green. Oh God, Gershon. And all these freaking, again, state-run Celtics social media with their dabs and their gifs and their dancing bears and like, oh my God.
Oh, that's right.
That shit turns me into Felger, like reliving that in my mind. I'll just go off on a friggin' rant. But yeah, no, it's so glad that those days are gone. It's so glad that they're serious people now. So,
by the way, speaking of
that was a lot of that was weird Celtics Twitter too. But yeah, they were buying into that. They were loving that whole thing. That's true.
Yeah,
speaking of that conversation, guess who Isaiah is playing with, John, out there in Salt Lake?
Oh, my guy. I know.
Carson Edwards.
Romeo.
Is he playing with Carson Edwards? Oh no,
Romeo.
Right when he said that, he put the Carson Edwards down. Romeo's
trying to get back
shit
in the
people used to cling to. It's like
you guys know what that is, though, right?
I don't know if every Celtics fan is 14 years old and has never followed like a cycle of like basketball, before with like guys like Begarin and Yem Madar to know that those guys are never real. I don't know how people talk themselves into this shit.
I like Begarin.
Yeah, but you
didn't, Bobby. You just didn't know any better.
To me, the Romeo signing.
He was good in that last summer league.
To me, Utah bringing Romeo is Danny saying, "Look, I'm not done with this kid. All right, he could still be an NBA player. I'm going to show everyone that pick was legitimate. Because he got a lot of flack for that. How many
Danny
times?
Was so bad those last couple of years.
Exactly, but Bobby, that's when it started. It was that year. It was like, wait a minute. Like, how many years are we going to let Danny get away with this with these late first round picks? Like, granted, they're late first rounders, but like these are misses and a half, you know. And I feel like that's where really people really started to say, okay, you have to hit here. And then when Romeo didn't pan out, people were like, okay, like something's got to change here.
By the way, Danny's roster here isn't looking too hot. They were getting a lot of love last year, and
that's why I think he's pulling for the Romeos and like those guys that John likes so much. You know, when they kind of like the striking out in the first 3-4 years of their career, and then you try to get the
Chris Dunn, that worked out for them.
A new surrounding and see what happens.
Seeing Chris Dunn to me is the funniest thing, and I know we're off on a tangent here.
Yeah, we are.
But it is. It's so funny reliving some of these names of these people that
he was in the draft class
play. Chris Dunn is the guy everybody wanted instead of Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown got booed because they didn't say Chris Dunn's name, which is insane to think about. Insane.
And you had a real
after that, John. You know what I thought about after that? Dragon Bender, who got picked after Jaylen.
He was 4th or 5th. The only guy I liked in that draft actually was Murray. That was the only guy I liked in that draft.
That was the only guy I said if they don't pick Jaylen, then go for Murray because I like Jaylen.
I like Murray. I like Murray. I didn't. Brown was like that project guy. Murray's the only guy I liked in that draft.
That was a good one, but 1 year late, like that was forget.
But Sabonis went in that draft too.
Yeah, and then
a little bit lower. He wasn't considered, but the Celtics took Yabusele at fucking freaking 16.
Oh yeah,
in that draft.
Yeah.
No, but forget the Yabusele.
And then oh my God, Ante Zizic. Talking ourselves into that friggin' guy.
Forget all that, John. You know, forget the Yabusele.
Siakam and Murray go late in that one. You're taking friggin' Brogdon goes that year. You're taking friggin' Yabusele. Oh my God, why are we doing this to ourselves?
But forget
he was 16th, right?
You got to hand it to him, though, because 1 year later, when everybody was taking the cheese on Fultz, everybody said Fultz was one, and they pivoted and went Tatum when there was still like a little Josh Jackson thing there, too. A lot of people like Jackson over Tatum, too.
Yeah, but that's the thing, Bobby.
He was set on Tatum.
No one was questioning Danny Ainge when it came to lottery picks. He was usually pretty clutch with that. It was just like after the top 10, and this is a guy who would value the shit out of those picks. You know, like okay, they're not
all this stuff's valid.
They're still super valuable, man. He valued second rounders, but you know, first round picks. There was a gap. There was like, okay, no, he values these. He's gonna hit with one of these, and it was a lot of misses, especially those that were like right outside of lottery of being a lottery pick, you know,
insane misses.
No, but despite all those misses, the Brown and Tatum hits were so good that's what allowed you to have this turnaround.
You can never missing at the top 3 is 100 times worse than whiffing at 13, 14, 16, 18.
2 years in a row.
Look at the teams that miss there. Imagine you take Josh Jackson in that spot.
That's like a 10-year blow.
You're in the darkness for a decade. You're exactly right, Bobby. Suns. You're done. Like imagine taking Bender over Brown. You're done. You're done. Your franchise is in total darkness. I mean, the good thing is you probably keep picking that high over and over and over again. But yes, hitting on those guys the way that they did is franchise altering. Missing at those other ones just makes it harder to maintain, you know, the bottom of your roster and having guys coming up. And it's why they've had to make as many trades as they've made, because they didn't have any guys coming up. They didn't have their maxis, you know, picked it, you know, they had the wrong guy, you know.
But Danny wouldn't have made these trades though. That's the thing. Like he would not switch real quick, like Brad stepping into that spot and then just going to work as soon as possible. Like all of that
used to drive me crazy with the picks thing.
Oh man, like Danny, I don't even like. I'd have to really like. We should do this one day, Bob, during the offseason. Do like a deep dive of like alternative universe if Danny was still in charge and the whole Brad thing never happened. Let's say like they got a new coach, or maybe if Brad stayed, whatever. But like it would have been a very different path. You know, the Al Horford trade, and fast forward to the Derek White and what happened this past offseason for Drew Holiday. I mean, look, we all value that. We value Drew at a high level, but Danny, he would have been saying, guys, he's 34. Are we really going to put in 2 first round picks? We already got Chris. I don't know. I don't know if he makes that move. I don't even know if the steps to get there would have even happened. Never mind, you know, what happens right after that season that Brad Stevens stepped down, you know, when they switched or whatever. But yeah.
So anyway, you know, that's
Celtics history for you guys. You know,
neither here nor there. I don't know
Any
how.
new fans.
I think we were talking about, just how it pertains to the current roster and the current bench and just how set they are now, where you don't have to worry about these things. If you're worrying about the current bench that's been playing really well in the playoffs, again, champagne problems considering how good everyone's been around them. So right now you're really only, again, every time we talk about these things, it's not like the Celtics aren't going to win because their bench sucks, which I think some people wrongly interpret.
We better not have that conversation if they lose.
No, what I'm saying is everything that we might bring up now is just simply what could possibly derail them now.
I know, but I just know that's
right.
where the chat's going if they lose. It was Cornette.
Joe and Luke and Beckerin.
Well, that's what happens when you rely on these guys. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, we've prattled on long enough. We're back Thursday. These guys are kicking it back in the Garden. Phoenix.
Finally.
That's a fun one. Should have everybody in that game. So happy that this, like I said, this stretch is over. Celtics do well to close off this trip here on a winning note, beating the Utah Jazz 51-14 right now. And again, by the time, is it over yet? The Bucks, have they lost yet? It's over. Oh my God.
This is like the last game in the regular season where
they got drilled 129-94 with their full lineup in there. And again,
I can't wait to see these guys in Boston next week.
9.5 game lead, 10 games in the loss column. Insane right now. What a gap there is between them and the rest of the East.
Bucks team.
Oh, they messed up.
It is.
Just start from the Giannis thing during the offseason and pretty much just having him just kind of just redirect the team and then everything just kind of blowing up from there.
That had to be how people looked at the 2019 Celtics. Like, what the hell is going on there?
Yeah.
All that talent, and they just.
And I do agree here. But as Jimmy likes to say, and I think it's a very apt, analogy. These guys, the core. The Jays, Marcus before him, it's like your children. They can do no wrong. Everyone else is getting blamed if they go down. But again, I don't think it's happening. Not with this team. Not until the finals.
Yeah,
so
that was
again,
my point. Yeah.
I don't see it. But anyway, thank you guys for hanging with us throughout the West Coast trip on a night where, again, you're playing the Blazers, you're playing the Bucks, and there's not much to talk about. You guys keep us entertained with your chatter and keep each other entertained when we're talking about nonsense as well.
Man.
So again,
in here. Appreciate you guys, man. Look at this.
Always fun hanging out. Thank you guys again. We will see you on. Oh, let me cue up our little outro. We will see you guys on Thursday. Good night.
Wait, Amit's got an outro for us, I think.
No, he doesn't.
He said he was going to work on an outro.
He had a phenomenal game.
Forfeit's out. I think it's an auction. That did not sound like a chair.
It was a freaking chair. It does sound like a chair.